Hi, my name's Deborah. I'm 48 years old and I work at Community Solutions. I was brought up in Accrington with my parents and my two brothers. They were older than me. I was the baby of the family. They were 10 and 13 when I was born. When I was born, my mum and dad both worked. They worked professionally within an insurance company and within a solicitor's. As a child, I became diabetic at the age of 5. It was quite a strong influence on what I did, where I went, what I ate. As a child, emotionally, I did like to express myself. I've always been really chatty, enthusiastic, but sometimes that wasn't quite encouraged. Although I grew up in a home where very often we were exposed to everybody else's emotions. As I was younger, my dad became a minister. Our family became the church. And we were very used to people ringing up in the middle of the night, people calling and wanting to share their emotions and life stories. And so I grew up really understanding that people around me did have needs, they did need support, and I became very responsible at a very young age. As a teenager, I met the love of my life, my husband Craig, when I was 14 in 1988. And at 16 I gave my GCSEs. And then at 18, when I was doing my A-levels, I decided to quit my A-levels because I wanted to marry, and I wanted to marry Craig. So the week after my 18th birthday, I signed up for my first mortgage and became a very responsible adult at a very young age. I had various jobs when I got married. I worked in a solicitor's as a legal secretary. I worked in a warehouse as an administrator, sales environment, and also I'd always kind of done some volunteering from the age of 16. And Craig and I were youth workers at a very young age, and even at 21 we informally fostered, and we had her for 2.5 years in our home. Our home was a very open environment for young people, and we learned a lot about demands on young people and the issues that young people face. But at the age of 23, I had my first child, Gabrielle, and I had her 6 weeks early. It was quite a drama. And very quickly, within a few years, we completed our family, and we had a family of 3. So the twins, Katie and Millie, came along in 1999 and completed our family. And at that time, I really enjoyed being a mum. I enjoyed being at home with children. And as they started to get a bit older, I'd carried on volunteering in different capacities. I really felt that I needed to study, so I went and did some counselling qualifications. That culminated in me getting a degree in health and applied social sciences, and I came out with a first class honours degree, much to my surprise, but much to my pleasure as well. And Craig at the same time also completed his social work degree. At the age of 33, I entered the work of children's services, family support and complex cases. I'd always felt that I had one arm up my back during this period, and I couldn't actually help and support people in the way that I wanted to, or the way that I thought they deserved. And finally at 37, I found what I was really good at, and I used all my life experience to set up Community Solutions. It's been 11 years of supporting and helping people in our community, and I still wake up every day and I love going to work. The people are the thing that I love the most. Our participants, volunteers and my colleagues, we are one big family. In my 40s and throughout my life, I've had a very strong Christian faith. And at times, even though I've walked away, I've never lost my faith. But in the last 12 years, I have really needed that faith. I would not be here and still standing if God had not been with me through that period and guided me through. In 2009, our family suffered a very traumatic experience. It's not my experience to share, but I even remember on that day where I was, the sickening feeling of hearing some awful news and the devastation that it caused and rippled through our family. In the year following that, I really decided that I was going to make something positive. During that period, I really felt that helping people helped me. Since 2015, I've lost a further 10 people in my life. Bereavement has no age and it has no postcode. and it could happen to anybody at any time, and probably will. And during that period, I've also had ill health. I've also nursed people with serious ill health. I brought up 3 teenagers, which is not always easy, and had loads and loads of things happen that really have affected my life. Of those I've lost my brother, my godmother, my father-in-law, my dad, my best friend, 2 of my aunties, an uncle, my cousin Gavin, and finally this year, my mum. Also, I experienced the loss of participants and volunteers. This has led me to develop a lot of the end-of-life services here at Community Solutions and the bereavement support that we offer to people. A lot of the drama with these situations have included various forms of cancer, dementia, murder, suicide, COVID-19 and many other things along the way. And it's no surprise that 2 years ago I burnt out. I hadn't stopped at once during the period since 2015. I hadn't taken any bereavement leave apart from the day of the funeral on all the funerals that I've been to. So 2 years ago I came into work and I found I just couldn't breathe. I was in a meeting with other managers and I started to cry, which is at that time very, very unusual. And I couldn't breathe and I was having a panic attack. And Craig took me to one side and said, "You need to go home. You need to look after yourself. You need to stop." I went home. I rang up somebody who was recommended to me. She was a counsellor. Bearing in mind, I'd run a counselling service at Community Solutions for a number of years, but I'd never actually been counselled. I'd never experienced that therapy. And it was in that time that I rested and I started to unpick the trauma of the last number of years prior to that. That time in my life was the beginning of a really exciting healing and a really exciting opportunity to live differently. And I started to talk. I talked about the pain. I talked about things I'd never told anybody else. I became very honest and very real and very authentic in my relationships. And one of the biggest relationships that I began to develop was my relationship with Jesus, and my relationship that in all the busyness had sometimes fallen to the side. And I began to develop a real daily habit of considering my day before I got out of bed. I'd read my Bible, I'd pray. But it started to change me on the inside and started to give me a lot of hope and a lot of comfort and a lot of healing in that period. And although I'd always shared my faith, I'd always been a giving person, it was just a period where I was becoming who I need to be in the next season of my life. Just as this was happening, my dad died, and I had the privilege of being with him when he passed. And I began to have what I now call good grief, which I'd never experienced before. And I grieved for my dad for 12 months in a really healthy, positive way. I knew my dad was a man of faith. I knew that he was going to heaven, and that's where he went. And I took great comfort. I was upset because I've always been a daddy's girl, but it was something that was good, positive, normal grief after a really long period of not having that. Just as that period was coming to an end, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer. We had a really fun relationship. We'd shop together, we'd laugh together, we'd go out for meals. But it was in that period of the last 12 months of Mum's life that I actually really experienced and understood how our family had formed, how life and her childhood and everything had made a difference to who she was. And I was able to make sense of some of the things that I'd experienced over the years. In June, Lady Edna passed into heaven. I was with her and sang and prayed over her. It was such a precious time, and I know in my heart what I knew in my head, that heaven is real and that the afterlife is something really exciting. I also realised at the time that there was a season ending and a new one beginning. I felt lost and vulnerable. I couldn't see what the next season would bring. And both being lost and vulnerable are two things that I really don't like. But during the last 6 months, I've reevaluated my life, and along with my husband Craig, we've looked back on our life and how the hand of God has been on it during some very tough and some very happy times. In 2022, we're making a change. Craig and I are going as senior ministers at Brave Church in Oswaldtwistle, which is a fabulous organisation and one that's been very close to our hearts for the last 25 years. And in this change, we are really, really thankful that Community Solutions is going to be in the very best, wonderful, capable hands. And we're leaving an amazing team of volunteers and staff that are absolutely passionate about supporting people in our community. And whatever time we've got left on this earth, we want to have it for eternal, meaningful purpose. And this change in our lives hopefully will mean that we can come alongside people, maybe going through the same experiences as we have. Maybe they need an arm around the shoulder, maybe they need somebody to laugh with, maybe they need some practical help. But what we're going to be doing is really fulfilling what we really believe is our next season of life.